On January 24th, 1964, a man entered a bank with an appearance that can only be described as clown-like. He was wearing a mask of French President Charles de Gaulle. He also had on a wig that was trying to mimic the Beatles' hair. So it's like a bowl cut kind of wig. This was 1964, so the Beatles were huge, and these wigs were sold everywhere. So yeah, he had this like shitty Beatles hair over this mask. He then had on sunglasses. He was wearing a shirt from a local radio station. The shirt read, CKEY, good guys. So our bank robber here is a bit of a troll. He was also holding a guitar case, and sticking out of the guitar case was this weird object that was painted pink. When he walked into the bank, the people in there didn't know what to make of him, and they thought it was some kind of joke or prank, or maybe related to the radio station that was written on his shirt. The man then opened his guitar case and pulled out a semi-automatic rifle with its barrel painted pink. The manager of the bank thought it was a toy gun because of the pink barrel, so he said something along the lines of, "This isn't very funny." The man responded by pointing the gun at the manager's head and then shooting right next to it, leaving a hole in the wall. So yeah, now the manager was sure this was a real bank robbery. The bank robber hopped over the counter and told the employees to fill his bags full of money out of the tills. Once the tills were full, he requested that the vault was opened. While the vault was opening, he looked out onto the street to see if any police had been arriving, and there was nobody. He was also quoted saying, "Hurry up, robbing banks is a tough way to make a living," which the employees and customers found was an odd comment. And it probably has to do with our robber's weird sense of humor. After the vault had been opened and the money was put in his bag, he casually strolled out the front door of the bank and walked towards his getaway car. His getaway car was parked on a side street next to the bank. As the robber was leaving, one customer in the bank decided he was going to jump into action. This was 54-year-old Jack Blanc. Jack Blanc was a veteran of the Canadian Army as well as the Israeli Army. This robbery happened at a bank in North York, which is in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. In the 1960s, some bank employees were actually equipped with revolvers, and they were told in the event of a robbery that they were supposed to shoot back and fight for the money, which sounds like a terrible idea. When the robber came in though, I think all the employees were like, "I'm not paid enough for this shit," and they didn't fight back, which I would do too. I'm not shooting at this random robber. Either way, Jack Blanc knew they had the revolvers at the bank, and he wanted to get one and chase after the robber. Jack Blanc went up to the manager and told him to get the revolver and that he was a crack shot and that he'd get his money back. The manager got the revolver but didn't give it to Jack. He explained that the money was insured and that there was no point chasing after this guy. Sally Blanc, his wife, was also there, and she was pleading with him not to go and said that he would be killed and it wasn't worth it. Despite that, Jack insisted on getting this pistol and chasing after him. So he started to scuffle with the bank manager and eventually got the gun with him and started going after the robber. So the robber had made it to his getaway car at the end of the side street, and it was a 1963 Ford Galaxy that he had stolen. Now the robber had actually modded the car so it didn't need to be turned on with a key. It was just a switch, and he did this so he could get away faster. But sometimes simplicity is better, because when he flipped the switch, the car did not turn on. So as he was fiddling with the switch, Jack Blanc turned the corner of the street with the revolver. The robber was at one end in his car and Jack Blanc was at the other end. Jack Blanc started to fire off shots at the car. The robber quickly got out of the car with a pistol and started firing back. Now another thing to mention about these revolvers that were used in the banks, they were 6-cylinder revolvers, but they were only ever equipped with 4 bullets. This was because there was an accident in a bank where someone dropped the revolver and it went off and hit somebody. So now they would make sure there wasn't a bullet in the chamber or in the cylinder next to the chamber. Jack did not know that there was only 4 bullets in this revolver and essentially shot all 4 and missed all of them. As he went for a 5th shot, there was obviously no bullet and it didn't shoot. The robber at this point had gotten his rifle at the back of his car and calmly and collectively raised it and aimed it at Jack. The robber took a shot and the shot hit Jack's hand and reflected and hit his chest. Then after that, the robber aimed again and took another shot. This shot hit Jack right in the top of the head. This shot apparently was so forceful that it splattered blood 3 stories high on a nearby apartment building. So Sally Blanc was right in telling her husband that he was going to die. An accountant that worked at the bank named Carmen Lamb went and got another revolver. He saw Jack get shot, and now he was going to try to get the robber that had committed murder. He went around the corner and fired all 4 shots of the revolver and missed all of them. This is a common theme in this story where people miss all their shots or they screw up in some way with the gun. The robber was now not in immediate danger of Good Samaritans shooting at him, but he was in danger because his car couldn't start. He started to walk back towards the bank. Now at this time, there was actually a third Good Samaritan who was formulating a plan. A truck driver had witnessed all the events that happened and decided he needed to get a car to chase after the getaway car. I don't know what it is about the 1960s, but it seems like everybody is way more brave or way more of a Good Samaritan. If it was me, I'm not chasing after the guy with an assault rifle that just blew off somebody's head. But that's just me. Either way, this truck driver ran up to a random person in their car and said, "I need your car to chase after the robber." And the person gave up the car to the random truck driver, which is another thing that wouldn't happen today. It's like something you see in like a cop show or something. Now at this time, coincidentally, an unmarked police car rolled up to the bank. He saw all the chaos around the bank and asked what happened. The bystander sent him in the direction of where the robber went. So with his police car, he goes and turns the corner onto the side street. As he turns the corner, he sees the robber standing in the middle of the street with his goofy ass disguise, holding his assault rifle. The robber quickly started firing shots all over the front of the car. The police officer ducked under the hood to protect himself. Now at the same time as the police car is going around the corner, the truck driver who took the car to borrow to try to save the day also turns the corner. And when he turns the corner, he sees a dude spraying down a cop car with an assault rifle and freaks out. And I'm not joking, I'm not kidding. He jumps out of the car, he rolls out of the car, and now the car slowly rolls up to the robber with the keys still in the ignition. It was the robber's lucky day because he just hopped in the car and drove away. What's even luckier is the cop car that he shot up would not start at that point because it had been hit by so many bullets. Also conveniently, he had hit the radio in the car, so now the police officer couldn't call in backup. So yeah, this robber just got away scot-free. Now you're probably wondering, who is this guy? This man was 24-year-old Matthew Kerry Smith. He had committed 2 other bank robberies at this point. His first robbery, when he was 19, he went into a bank with a pistol, accidentally shot it off, and hit the bank teller in the head. Luckily, the bank teller survived. As Kerry was leaving the bank, an employee pulled out a revolver and started firing shots, and obviously missed all of them. The second bank robbery he committed was actually on Christmas Eve. He ran to a bank, dual-wielding pistols, shooting up in the air like Yosemite Sam. He then quickly got the money, and on the way out said, "Merry Christmas." So yeah, this is our troll back at it again. Now Matthew Kerry Smith mostly went by Kerry, his middle name. When Kerry was young, his mother lost custody of him because she was deemed insane. And that's the term they used at the time. Probably she had schizophrenia. After she lost custody, he went to live with his dad. Kerry at the age of 10 had an obsession of reading about crimes in the newspaper. When he would read the crimes, he would get mad and he would boast that he wouldn't make the same mistakes and that he would do it better. So yeah, this was obviously a red flag for his dad that his son was obsessed with crime. He was hoping he'd grow out of it though, which he did not. Kerry, as he grew up, was pretty antisocial. He was said to have weird mannerisms and eclectic behavior, and of course the sense of humor that we're already starting to get familiar with. He did not fit in a lot of places. He eventually dropped out of high school. After dropping out of high school, he joined the Navy. In the Navy, he also didn't fit in. He eventually asked to be discharged, and the military discharged him without any other questions. They were okay with getting rid of him, it seems. When Kerry returned from the Navy, he then decided he was going to rob his first bank, which he successfully did at 19 years old. Not long after this first bank robbery, he decided he was going to steal a car just for fun. He stole a car and was joyriding it down the street when he came across a police officer who quickly started to follow him. He then led a high-speed chase through the city and eventually crashed. When he was caught and taken to court, he had no real explanation of why he did it, and when the judge asked what they should do, he said, "Throw the book at me." The judge did not in fact throw the book at him. Instead, the judge decided that Kerry was probably dealing with some kind of psychological issue, and that he needed psychiatric evaluation. Kerry was evaluated and diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was then let out on parole and told to get treatment for his schizophrenia, which he did for a little while, but then stopped going. And it seems at the time, they didn't really follow up with these type of things. At this point, he was a free man. He moved to Manitoba to work at a mine. At this time, Kerry was known to enjoy a good party. He would frequently go over to a native reserve and party with the natives, which was considered odd at the time. With the money he would make at the mine, he would buy guns and go home and practice target shooting. He would eventually leave Manitoba and come back to Toronto. He got a job at a tire factory. Not long after that, Kerry decided he wanted a military-grade assault rifle. So one night he broke into an armory and tied up 2 of the employees there. He searched the armory but did not find the gun he was looking for and left empty-handed. Instead, he decided he was going to go and buy it legally. He went to a gun store and put in the order of an FN semi-automatic rifle. Now on the order sheet, he wrote his name as Owen Fox and put a fake address. Now, what's really bizarre in Canada at the time, there was a loophole where you didn't have to register when you bought a rifle. The law said you had to register when you bought a firearm, but firearm under their definition was only a handgun. This didn't apply to rifles. On the other end of this law, they also said if you bought an automatic rifle, this also had to be registered. But the rifle Kerry bought was semi-automatic, so you could just walk into the store and be like, hey bro, give me that. And they just hand it over with no registration. Obviously, this has changed a lot, especially in Canada. I don't know why anybody thought this was a good idea. So Kerry now had a military-grade rifle. It was at this time that he did the Merry Christmas robbery. After this robbery, he decided he was going to drive out to Manitoba for a bit of fun. He had made a friend at the mine there named Joe. Joe and him met up, and Joe suggested they go on a double date. Joe's girlfriend had a friend who was single. Her name was Eileen Griffiths. Eileen was Métis, which means she was a mix of Native American and European, and she lived on the First Nations Reserve. Kerry and Eileen hit it off instantly. The next day after they met, he invited her to go back to Toronto with him, and she agreed. So yeah, now we got a little cute love story going on. Oh, also Joe decided he was going to come along with the ride back to Toronto as well. So he returned to Toronto with Eileen and saved up money at his job and eventually bought a single-story house. He then invited his old friend from the Navy to come live with him named Richard. Richard and him would sit in the basement with pellet guns and shoot targets for fun, and Kerry was stockpiling the house with guns. Now at this point, Kerry started to say some interesting things. He wanted to overthrow the government and start a revolution. He couldn't explain why he wanted to, or what the government had even done wrong. He didn't have any political ideologies, and couldn't even say what he would change when he did take over the government. He just wanted a violent revolution. Kerry knew though, if he wanted to have this revolution, he needed to be able to fund it. He decided he'd rob more banks. Now this brings us back to where we were previously in the story, where he robbed the bank and shot Jack Blanc. Kerry had got away in the car that luckily rolled up to him, and got away scot-free. When he returned home, he mentioned he killed a man, but did not seem remorseful. He said it was kill or be killed, and didn't regret it. Back at the crime scene, the police were investigating, and they were able to figure out that the bullets that were shot came out of an FN rifle. FN rifles have a very distinct profile, and they weren't very common in Canada at the time. So they were able to check and see, and only 5 rifles had been sold to people in Ontario. The police then crossed off 4 people on the list, and all they had left was a guy named Owen Fox, which we know doesn't exist. This was a dead end for the police, and Kerry had gotten away with this robbery scot-free. Not long after, Kerry decided he was going to do another robbery, but this time it would be in the town of Sutton. Sutton is a small town near Toronto. For this heist, he decided he wanted a partner. He teamed up with a co-worker named Warren. One day they drove to Sutton in Kerry's car to stake out the place. Since Sutton is a small town, people were instantly suspicious of this car slowly going around looking around the place. So someone actually wrote down their license plate number. They of course didn't know this. After they left Sutton, they put together a plan. They got Warren's wife to buy a car, and she promised she would change the name over in the registration to the people she bought it from. She didn't do this. This car was going to be their getaway car, so they went and parked it in Sutton. On the day of the robbery, Kerry had a trailer attached to his car, which had a boat in it. They took this car to Lake Simcoe and put the boat in the water, then took the boat to Sutton. Once they got out of the boat, they got in the getaway car they had already put there. They put on red balaclavas and went straight for the police station. They knew since Sutton was such a small town that there'd only be one officer at the station. They ran in and tied up the officer and then went towards the bank. When they got into the bank, yet another gun problem happened, and they shot off a shot by accident. It shot through one employee through their shoulder into the jaw of another. They both survived but were wounded. Karen and Warren eventually got the money. They got back in their escape vehicle and went towards the lake. At the lake, they abandoned the car, hopped back in the boat, and they took it to their other car that was waiting at the other shore. They were then able to easily drive away with no suspicion. When the police went to investigate this robbery, they looked at the getaway car, and when they looked at the owner, it was registered under the previous owners. They questioned them, and they said they had sold the car to a woman, but the woman had actually given a fake name. When Warren's wife had bought the car, she had used a fake name and then didn't change the registration. This was a dead end for the cops yet again. So yeah, that was a pretty hardcore heist they planned there and set up, and they really left no trace. Months later, in January of 1965, Kerry and Eileen's brother Kenneth were out driving late at night. Now, out of sheer coincidence, they passed a police officer who was given the task of running plates. The license plate that had been written down in Sutton had been given to the police. But they didn't actually link it to the bank robbery, they linked it to another crime. Either way, Kerry's car passed the officer. He looked at the plates and saw it matched the plates of the Sutton vehicle. He then pulled over the car and arrested Kerry and Kenneth. At the station, they were told to empty their pockets. Kenneth had blood-stained bills in his pocket, and when Kerry went for his pockets, he accidentally dropped a handgun out onto the floor. So yeah, this was not a good look for them, obviously. The police ran the numbers on the bills and were able to connect it to the Sutton robbery. They then went and investigated Kerry's house. When they went in, they found over 20 weapons and ammunition stockpiled. With the weapons, they were able to find parts of an FN rifle. The serial number of the parts matched the serial number on the rifle that was sold to Owen Fox. They now knew they found the man who killed Jack Blanc. At the station, Kerry admitted to his crimes instantly and started rambling on about his revolt and his revolution and how the government was going to be taken over. There he talked about how he admired the Nazis and the Communist Party of China, not because of their political ideology, but because of their willingness to use force for their cause. So yeah, that's odd. In 1965 in Canada, there was capital murder and non-capital murder. Capital murder had the punishment of the death penalty by hanging. Non-capital murder was life in prison. The defense for Kerry used the insanity plea. They claimed that he was in a delusional state and thought he was starting a revolution to overtake the government, and that he was not aware of the gravity of what he was doing. The prosecution for the Crown had the opposite opinion. They had a psychiatrist testify that Kerry wasn't actually schizophrenic. He just had antisocial and sociopathic tendencies. The prosecution also explained that Kerry was able to set up these meticulous plans without an issue, and that if he was truly insane, this wouldn't be possible. The jury did not deliberate very long. They ruled that Kerry was guilty of capital murder, and that he was sent to death by hanging. Kerry appealed this decision a couple times, but was denied each time. Now, at the time in 1965, there was controversy with the death penalty. The government at the time was looking to remove it or at least change it. The government decided that they were going to take the death penalty off the table. Kerry was now set to serve life in prison. While in prison, Kerry's mental health declined. This was noted by psychiatrists there, and they talked to the chief prison psychiatrist about this. They suggested that he was moved to a psychiatric ward. The chief prison psychiatrist decided that he didn't need to be moved there and left him in general population. On June 13th, 1966, Kerry was found in his cell in a pool of blood. He had slit his wrist with a razor blade and was dead. He did not leave a note. The prison was somehow deemed not negligible in his death, which is an interesting ruling, but, you know, it was the 60s. I also forgot to mention that while this was all going on, Eileen was actually pregnant with Kerry's child, and she gave birth to a son who was named Kerry Jr. Kerry Jr. has been interviewed and has said he thinks his father killed himself because he was actually regretful. I guess that's his interpretation. There's no way of really knowing why Kerry killed himself. But Kerry Jr. believes his dad killed himself out of guilt of killing Jack Blanc. So yeah, this brings us to the end of this wild story. The man in the ridiculous disguise who wanted to start a revolution, who had luck on his side and then had luck go against him when he was eventually caught. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. I try to find stories that haven't been covered that much, and I'm constantly researching new stories. Thank you for watching.